Welcome back. When the dust settles after Zimbabwe's historic and disputed elections, rebuilding the economy will be top of the agenda. President-elect Emmerson Mnangagwa is trying to woo investors. He's claimed to have secured $15 billion in foreign investment, but most big companies have chosen to wait until after the vote before making any moves. Forbes Africa's Chris Bishop joins us now to discuss Zimbabwe's economic future. Chris, good morning to you.
Good morning to you too. Actually, I'm head of programming now at CNBC Africa.
Fantastic. We'll change it. Thank you. Thanks for clearing that up for us. Talk to us first, Chris, about what the chances are for Zimbabwe in terms of economic revival, given the kind of election that they've just gone through. Some are saying that this election has actually been the most transparent, historic, but you still had bloodshed on the streets. Can Mnangagwa attract those investors into the country?
Well, I think that the election has been seen as dubious. Today, the opposition is going to decide whether or not to go to court. A court case will come. I don't know whether they're going to go anywhere with it. I think from a distance, I think for foreign investors, I think they'll be forgetting in a few months, 6 months, a year's time, who will care what happened in the elections. But I think the big problem he's got is trying to convince people that the old habits of the past, which were, as we know, land seizures, a 51% rule for all foreign companies, ownership in Zimbabwe, which Mnangagwa said that has been scrapped. I went through his first investment document when he came into power, when I was at Davos in Switzerland for the World Economic Forum with CNBC Africa. And I read through it, and some of the stuff in there, really, I mean, if you were a foreign investor and you looked at that, you would think, my gosh, these guys have got to work a lot harder before they come to us. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff in there.
What was problematic about what he was promising?
Well, I mean, he said they were going to set up a tribunal for farmers who'd lost their land to work out how much compensation they were going to get. Number one, it sounds like a good idea, but number two, who's going to pay the money in a country where foreign hard currency is short? The government coffers certainly a lot drier than most people think. Secondly, there was even one of the things that struck me was that the platinum industry, through all this turmoil and trouble, is still doing quite well. These people in mining circles here, platinum mining circles, they look to Zimbabwe and they say, yeah, you know, despite everything, the operations up in Zim have gone quite well. I saw that the government was planning to rewrite the regulations around platinum and diamonds, which again is uncertainty for foreign investors. The 51% rule as well, scrap for now, but could it ever return? That's a lot of things people are going to talk about.
Chris, I go back to my original intro here, that when the dust has settled, so when Mnangagwa is eventually inaugurated, will these investors start going into Zimbabwe to, invest as Mnangagwa would want them to be? And I ask that question importantly because as much as this election is seen as having been marred by violence and what have you, are people genuinely desperate to put money into Zimbabwe in order to make good returns?
Well, the old saying is capital is coward. I think if people think they can go in there and they can make high returns, maybe 25, 26% plus in short term, I think certainly money will come in. I think Zimbabwe needs the money like a man lost in the desert needs a drink. I think that certainly, I think as well, the last chance saloon is here for Mnangagwa and his country. I mean, the infrastructure's crumbling. A lot of the confidence has been lost. A lot of the skills have gone out of the country. A lot of people have left the country with skills. And I think now's the time when it needs foreign investment to pour in and to build up the economy again. And I think that certainly, if anything, if Mnangagwa wants to be remembered as anything apart from somebody who's in Mugabe's cabinet for 30-odd years, he wants to be remembered as the business president. He wants to be remembered as the guy who turned the corner for Zimbabwe. I think now's the time to do it.
But how does it do that, Chris? How does it do that with the army clearly still very much involved in what some would argue is important decision-making, particularly in government and the politics of the day in Zimbabwe? As we speak, we haven't heard reports that say the army troops have retreated from, guarding certain central or important points in Zimbabwe. How does he achieve that without, again, being seen as still hung up in the past?
Well, it's a very difficult one. You've got to understand why the army does have such a say, because there's been desperation in the country, there's been instability and unrest, and a lot of it goes back to the question of poverty, to the question of shortages, to a question of shortage of currency even, which has held back the economy greatly. And I think that if Mnangagwa can be bold and brave and say to the world, come in, do business, we'll get the regulation certainty down, we'll get you'll have support from government departments, you'll have support of the institutions in the country. Come in, invest your money with confidence, you can repatriate your profits, you can do what you like, as long as you obey the rules and pay your taxes, then I'm sure a lot of people would come in. I mean, there's vast resources, there's diamonds, there's platinum, there's chrome, there's gold, there's a huge agriculture industry there, which has shown signs of revival. The tobacco price and selling was pretty good this year. I think that there's still a lot of potential there. I was just writing a column the other day for CNBC saying about back in the day when I was traveling across sub-Saharan Africa, when we used to come back to Zimbabwe from a long trip, we used to get out the car virtually and kiss the ground because everything was there. Infrastructure was there, things worked, you could buy things, everything happened. And unfortunately, in latter years, the reverse has been true in many cases.
Chris, just moving away from the economic element as we wrap up this interview, talk to me about, politically speaking now, the issue around whether Mnangagwa will reach out to his bitter rival, that's Nelson Chamisa. Will that help the situation? Will that help with attracting these international investors to come into the country? Because he needs that unity. He needs that assurance.
I think he needs that peace. I think leaving alone his rivals is going to be the greatest thing he's ever going to do. I mean, you look what happened on Friday. I mean, riot police breaking up and storming and breaking up a press conference, something I have never seen, not in 37 years of journalism, not in any country in Africa, not in any country around the world. Who does that, And the thing is, the old crocodile, he's clever, because he said in a press conference afterwards, it was a wrong thing to do, etc. But why did the police do it? They must have had the nod.
Is he in control of this very army?
Exactly, but the whole point is, I mean, one thing about Zimbabwe, I do remember when I was working there in the 90s, that it was a very peaceful place. It had its problems. And really, if you wanted to upset the authorities, you had to go for quite a long way before you did it. And I think that if Mnangagwa could pour oil on troubled waters, leave the opposition alone and concentrate on the job of getting foreign investors, Zimbabwe will be a lot better country in 10 years' time than it is now.